Parliament is resumed. Please be seated.
Obituary and other ceremonial speeches.
None today, but I gather there are quite a few persons that we have lost. So I'll advise all members to prepare that we'll have a session tomorrow to deal with obituaries and the loss of so many Caymanians.
Raising of matters of privileges.
None.
Government business bills. Third readings. Banks and Trust Companies Amendment Bill 2024.
I recognize the Honorable Premier and Minister of Financial Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move that a bill shortly entitled the Banks and Trust Companies Amendment Bill 2024 be given a third reading and passed.
The question is that a bill shortly entitled the Banks and Trust Companies Amendment Bill 2024 be given a third reading and passed. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. I believe the ayes have it. The Banks and Trust Companies Amendment Bill 2024 has been duly passed.
Companies Amendment and Validation Bill 2024.
I recognize the Honorable Premier and Minister of Financial Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move that a bill shortly entitled the Companies Amendment Validation Bill 2024 be given a third reading and passed.
The question is that a bill shortly entitled the Companies Amendment and Validation Bill 2024 be given a third reading and passed. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. I believe the ayes have it. Accordingly, the Companies Amendment and Validation Bill 2024 has been duly passed.
Companies Management Amendment Bill 2024.
I recognize the Honorable Premier and Minister of Financial Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move that a bill shortly entitled the Company Management Amendment Bill 2024 be given a third reading and passed.
The question is that a bill shortly entitled the Companies Management Amendment Bill 2024 be given a third reading and passed. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. I believe the ayes have it. Accordingly, the Companies Management Amendment Bill 2024 has been duly passed.
Exempted Limited Partnership Amendment and Validation Bill 2024.
I recognize the Honorable Premier and Minister of Financial Services.
Thank you again, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move that a bill shortly entitled the Exempted Limited Partnership Amendment and Validation Bill 2024 be given a third reading and passed.
The question is that a bill shortly entitled the Exempted Limited Partnership Amendment and Validation Bill 2024 be given a third reading and passed. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. I believe the ayes have it. Accordingly, the Exempted Limited Partnership Amendment and Validation Bill 2024 has been duly passed.
Insurance Amendment and Validation Bill 2024.
I recognize the Honorable Premier and Minister of Financial Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill shortly entitled the Insurance Amendment and Validation Bill 2024 be given a third reading and passed.
The question is that a bill shortly entitled Insurance Amendment and Validation Bill 2024 be given a third reading and passed. Those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, no. I believe the ayes have it. Accordingly, the Insurance Amendment and Validation Bill 2024 has been given a third reading and is duly passed.
Limited Liability Companies Amendment and Validation Bill 2024.
I recognize the Honorable Premier and Minister of Financial Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move that a bill shortly entitled the Limited Liability Companies Amendment and Validation Bill 2024 be given a third reading and passed.
The question is that a bill shortly entitled the Limited Liability Companies Amendment and Validation Bill 2024 be given a third reading and passed. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. I believe the ayes have it. Accordingly, the Limited Liabilities Company Amendment and Validation Bill 2024 has been given a third reading and is duly passed.
Limited Liability Partnership Amendment and Validation Bill 2024.
I recognize the Honourable Premier and Minister of Financial Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move that a bill shortly entitled the Limited Liability Partnership Amendment and Validation Bill 2024 be given a third reading and passed.
The question is that a bill shortly entitled the Limited Liability Partnership Amendment and Validation Bill 2024 be given a third reading and passed. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. I believe the ayes have it. Accordingly, the Limited Liability Partnership Amendment and Validation Bill 2024 has been given a third reading and is duly passed.
Monetary Authority Amendment and Validation Bill 2024.
I recognize the Honourable Premier and Minister of Financial Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move that a bill shortly entitled the Monetary Authority Amendment and Validation Bill 2024 be given a third reading and passed.
The question is that a bill shortly entitled the Monetary Authority Amendment and Validation Bill 2024 be given a third reading and passed. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. I believe the ayes have it. Accordingly, the Monetary Authority Amendment and Validation Bill 2024 has been given a third reading and is duly passed.
Mutual Funds Amendment and Validation Bill 2024.
I recognize the Honourable Premier and Minister of Financial Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move that a bill shortly entitled the Mutual Funds Amendment and Validation Bill 2024 be given a third reading and passed.
The question is that a bill shortly entitled Mutual Funds Amendment and Validation Bill 2024 be given a third reading and passed. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. I believe the ayes have it. Accordingly, the Mutual Funds Amendment and Validation Bill 2024 has been given a third reading and is duly passed.
Partnership Amendment and Validation Bill 2024.
I recognize the Honourable Premier and Minister of Financial Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that a bill shortly entitled the Partnership Amendment and Validation Bill 2024 be given a third reading and passed.
The question is that a bill shortly entitled Partnership Amendment and Validation Bill 2024 be given a third reading and passed. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. I believe the ayes have it. Accordingly, the Partnership Amendment and Validation Bill 2024 has been given a third reading and is duly passed.
Private Funds Amendment and Validation Bill 2024.
I recognize the Honourable Premier and Minister of Financial Services.
Once again, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move the bill shortly entitled the Private Funds Amendment and Validation Bill 2024 be given a third reading and passed.
The question is that a bill shortly entitled the Private Funds Amendment and Validation Bill 2024 be given a third reading and passed. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. I believe the ayes have it. The Private Funds Amendment and Validation Bill 2024 has been given a third reading and is duly passed.
Securities Investment Business Amendment and Validation Bill 2024.
I recognize the Honourable Premier and Minister of Financial Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move that a bill shortly entitled the Securities Investment Business Amendment and Validation Bill 2024 be given a third reading and passed.
The question is that a bill shortly entitled the Securities Investment Business Amendment and Validation Bill 2024 be given a third reading and passed. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. I believe the ayes have it. Accordingly, the Securities Investment Business Amendment and Validation Bill 2024 has been given a third reading and is duly passed.
Virtual Asset Service Providers Amendment Bill 2024.
I recognize the Honorable Premier and Minister of Financial Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move that a bill shortly entitled the Virtual Asset Service Providers Amendment Bill 2024 be given a third reading and passed.
The question is that a bill shortly entitled Virtual Asset Service Providers Amendment Bill 2024 be given a third reading and passed. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. I believe the ayes have it. Accordingly, the Virtual Asset Service Providers Amendment Bill 2024 has been given a third reading and is duly passed.
Information and Communications Technology Validation Bill 2024.
I recognize the Honorable Minister for Planning, Agriculture, Housing, Infrastructure, Transport and Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move that a bill shortly entitled Information Communication Technology Validation Bill 2024 be read a third time and passed.
The question is that a bill shortly entitled the Information and Communications Technology Validation Bill 2024 be given a third reading and passed. Those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, no. I believe the ayes have it. Accordingly, the Information and Communications Technology Validation Bill 2024 has been given a third reading and is duly passed.
First readings. Misuse of Drugs Amendment Bill 2024.
The Misuse of Drugs Amendment Bill 2024 is deemed to have been read a first time and is set down for second reading.
Traffic Amendment Bill 2024.
The Traffic Amendment Bill 2024 is deemed to have been read a first time and is set down for second reading.
Public Transport Bill 2024.
The Public Transport Bill 2024 is deemed to have been read a first time and is set down for second reading.
Older Persons Amendment Bill 2024.
The Older Persons Amendment Bill 2024 is deemed to have been read a first time and is set down for second reading.
Children Amendment Bill 2024.
The Children Amendment Bill 2024 is deemed to have been read a first time and is set down for second reading.
Maintenance Amendment Bill 2024.
The Maintenance Amendment Bill 2024 is deemed to have been read a first time and is set down for second reading.
Adoption Bill 2024.
The Adoption Bill 2024 is deemed to have been read a first time and is set down for second reading.
Second readings. Misuse of Drugs Amendment Bill 2024.
I recognize the Honorable Attorney General.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that a bill, the long title of which is a bill for an act to amend the Misuse of Drugs Act 2017 revision to enhance the legislative framework for combating illicit trafficking activities conducted by air, to provide for reciprocal enforcement powers in relation to aircraft suspected of being involved in illicit trafficking activities, to designate officers of the Cayman Islands Coast Guard as enforcement officers under the Act, and for incidental and connected purposes. I beg to move for the second reading.
A bill shortly entitled the Misuse of Drugs Amendment Bill 2024 has been duly moved. Does the Honorable Attorney General wish to speak thereto?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, briefly, sir. Mr. Speaker, as the title suggests, it is an amendment, proposed amendment to the Misuse of Drugs Act, and I move the bill on behalf of the government. And the general purpose of the bill, Mr. Speaker, as outlined, is to deal with the suppressing of illicit maritime and air trafficking in narcotics, drugs, and psychotropic substances, primarily in the Caribbean area. And in doing so, Mr. Speaker, if passed, the bill would also facilitate greater cooperation between neighboring countries as it relates to trafficking by air or by sea of these narcotic substances. Mr. Speaker, the cooperation would be, well, probably will be underpinned by an arrangement that is being worked out between the UK and other Caribbean countries, including overseas territories, called the San Jose Accord, or Aruba Agreement. If it ever comes to fruition, Mr. Speaker, that agreement or treaty would help to facilitate the cooperation between countries in the Caribbean region as it relates to interdiction of narco-trafficking. Mr. Speaker, the bill itself seeks to amend the Misuse of Drugs Act, as I said, to enhance the legislative framework in Cayman for combating the trafficking activities conducted by air. Among other things, Mr. Speaker, it provides for reciprocal enforcement powers in relation to aircraft suspected of being involved in illicit trafficking activities, and designating officers of the Cayman Islands Coast Guard as enforcement officers under the Act for such purposes as well. Mr. Speaker, Clause 1 of the bill, as usual, provides for the short title. Clause 2, Mr. Speaker, seeks to amend the Misuse of Drugs Act 2017, the Principal Act, that is, 2017 revision, to update references to certain words used throughout the Act. For example, Mr. Speaker, the words customs officer are to be deleted where they appear and would be replaced by the words customs and border control officer. Clause 3, Mr. Speaker, amends Section 2 of the Act to provide for the insertion of definitions for certain words used throughout the bill. These include definitions for the words such as Cayman aircraft, Cayman Islands waters, customs and border control officer, enforcement officers, among other things, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Clause 5 of the bill amends Section 18 of the Act to provide that anything which would constitute a drug trafficking offense, if done on land in the islands, constitute that offense if done on a Cayman registered aircraft. Currently, Mr. Speaker, the section stipulates that anything which would constitute a drug trafficking offense if done on land in the island would constitute that offense if done on a Cayman registered ship. So we're extending that principle to cover aircraft as well, Mr. Speaker. So the reference to acts done on Cayman aircraft seeks to enhance the framework for combating illicit trafficking activities conducted by air. Clause 6, Mr. Speaker, amends Section 19(1) of the Act to extend the application of this section to Cayman aircraft and to aircraft registered in a state other than the islands, which is a party to the Vienna Convention or the Treaty of San Jose. The Vienna Convention, Mr. Speaker, is the one that deals with illicit drugs. The clause also amends Section 19(2) of the Act to provide that a person on a ship or an aircraft to which Section 19(1) applies, wherever it may be, commits an offense, Mr. Speaker, if the person has a controlled drug in a person's possession or is knowingly concerned in the carrying or concealing of controlled drug on the ship or on the aircraft, and knowing or having reasonable grounds to suspect that the drug is intended to be imported or has been exported contrary to Section 3(1) of the Misuse of Drugs Act or a law of any state other than the Cayman Islands. Clause 7 of the bill, Mr. Speaker, amend the Act by repealing and substituting a new Section 20 in order to extend the application of this section to provide for enforcement powers in respect of both ships and aircraft. So under the proposed section 20, Mr. Speaker, if it is the governor or where she so delegated, the relevant competent authority, who is responsible for authorizing the use of the powers conferred on the enforcement officer, which are exercisable in relation to certain ships or aircraft for detecting and taking appropriate action in respect of prescribed offenses. The relevant competent authorities is defined as, in relation to aircraft, the Director General of Civil Aviation Authority or his designate, and in relation to ship, Mr. Speaker, the Commandant of the Coast Guard or the designate of the Commandant. The proposed section 20 also provides, Mr. Speaker, that the governor or the relevant competent authority shall not grant this authority unless the relevant convention state has in relation to the ship or to the aircraft of that convention state requested the assistance of the Cayman Islands for the purpose of detecting or taking appropriate action in respect of these offenses. The proposed section, Mr. Speaker, provides that the governor or the relevant competent authority shall impose conditions or limitations on the exercise of the powers as may be necessary. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, the proposed section 20 provides that the powers which are conferred on enforcement officers are not to be exercised in or over the territory or the territorial waters of a state other than the Cayman Islands without the authority of the governor or the relevant competent authority. Clause 8 of the bill, Mr. Speaker, amends Section 21 of the Act to deal with jurisdictional matters on prosecutions in respect of both ships and aircraft. Clause 9 amend the Act by repealing and substituting Section 22 to provide for matters related to the entry into territorial waters by law enforcement officials on board law enforcement vessels of convention states. Mr. Speaker, the proposed Section 22 also expands the definition of the word law enforcement vessels to expressly include an aircraft of a convention state which is authorized to be in a government service at the state of that state, Mr. Speaker, for the purpose of enforcement under the legislation. Mr. Speaker, finally, Clause 10 amends Schedule 4 of the Act to provide for the extension of the application of enforcement powers in relation to aircraft and not just ships. Clause 10 also amends Schedule 4 to provide that the enforcement officer may monitor an aircraft, and where the aircraft lands in the islands, the enforcement officer may detain the aircraft if the enforcement officer thinks it's necessary for the exercise of the function of the enforcement officer. And if an enforcement officer detains an aircraft, he or she shall serve on the pilot a written notice stating that the aircraft is to be detained until the notice is withdrawn by the service on the pilot of a further written notice by that enforcement officer, Mr. Speaker, to that effect. So, Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, the bill, if passed, will enhance the legislative framework for combating illicit trafficking activities conducted by air and by sea, and ensure that the Cayman Islands have the necessary domestic legislation in place, Mr. Speaker, to deal with those things. And in the event of the Treaty of San Jose, we could also give effect to that treaty if extended to us by the United Kingdom. Mr. Speaker, it's a very short bill, but quite understandable, very important. And so I commend this bill to honorable members of this House. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Attorney General. Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? The Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise on behalf of the official opposition just to lend our support to this Misuse of Drugs Amendment Bill 2024. And it's good to see that it's expanding and giving more powers to our Coast Guard as we realize that the security of our borders especially those, our coastlines, are critical to law enforcement and to controlling the flow of illicit drugs and firearms. And of course, we had our first case of human trafficking tried in the courts this year. So we have heard from the Attorney General on this, and we are in full support of this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? The Honourable Member for Bordentown West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to also support the bill, but also to extend my thanks to all those involved in law enforcement with regards to dealing with this issue. And the reason I want to extend my thanks also, Mr. Speaker, is that looking at the compendium of statistics in terms of drug crime, 2023 is actually so far been reported as one of the lowest on record. For members of this honorable House and the listening public, just to put that in context, in 2016 there were 200 cases reported, 2017 179, 2018 205, 2019 167, 2020 182, 2021 165, 2022 154, and 2023 150. So you can see that there's a gradual decline over the last number of years. And I think we, all of us, not just in this House, but outside of this House, owe all of our residents in our public service and those in the private sector who work to basically bring these numbers down. I think that's actually a good trend. And it says at least something is working. One of the things I was curious, Mr. Speaker, as I was reading the bill, and I was looking at the Treaty of San Jose, and there's different signatories, I noticed that this started around 2003, with many of the countries ratified in around 2008. One of the things I could not find any documentation on is that there were still 4 countries that were still yet to ratify or sign on to the Treaty of San Jose. And those 4 were Jamaica, Haiti, Panama, and the United Kingdom. So I'm hoping when the Honorable Attorney General goes to wrap up, that he can actually speak to see if the UK has already signed on to it, or if they've not, then what timeline they're looking on to directly make sure it's there. At least if they did, I couldn't find it. And then one of the things I want to touch on now, Mr. Speaker, just briefly, is pretty much while we're looking at enhancing our security feature, we need to also be mindful in terms of the actual sentencings and so forth. We have seen in many media reports that there seems to be a different sentencing guidelines between people who show up at the airport with kind of drugs or even gummies, for example, and then those who basically are Caymanians. And that is one of the things that is causing some concerns, at least among some of the people that have spoken to me on it. I know there were recent reports where some children had invested some ganja gummies and they ended up being hospitalized for it. And I think it's important for the public to recognize why these efforts are necessary. Because when our children are getting access to these kind of drugs and being hospitalized for it at such a young age, this is why we do need legislation such as this to protect our borders a little bit more. And I think that is something that we should never forget. While we have, to some extent over the years, culturally laxed our approach in terms of dealing with cannabis, where now some people can, for medicinal purposes, have it and so forth. And in some cases, we do recognize that small quantities should be decriminalized. Nonetheless, it is still a drug that can damage people in terms of health-wise and everything else. But one of the things, Mr. Speaker, I'd just like to touch on the Attorney General with is that the issue of sentencing. And we need to look at it. There seems to be some disproportion in the way in which some Caymanians are treated, and that is something that needs to be looked in. And lastly, Mr. Speaker, one of the things I just want to touch on is amnesty bins. This is one of the things that some countries have, and I know local attorney Richard Barton has spoken about it also, is that we do recognize that some countries do have gummies and so forth that people can just have casually walk through TSA in the US with it, and when they arrive here realize, oops, this is not something that's legal in Cayman. If we can have some amnesty bins at the airport, so at least when people come in and recognize that this is an issue, or Cayman is not a place that where these things are legal, at least they can dump them willingly before end up in courts unnecessarily or so forth, because sometimes it may be second nature to people who's basically doing it. So I think that's just one of the things that we just need to also look at while we're looking at this legislation. But I commend this legislation. Anything to strengthen our borders, I support. And I just want to go on record again to thank all those involved in law enforcement for the job that they have done. The numbers speak for themselves, and we have seen a decline in the number of crime being reported. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? The Honourable Member for Newlands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to similarly support the bill, the Misuse of Drugs Amendment Bill. Mr. Speaker, prior to reading the bill, I was under the impression that aircraft were similarly treated, that is, Cayman Islands registered aircraft were similarly treated as is the case with Cayman Islands ships. So I am very grateful in the context. I think we have loads of anecdotal evidence of aircraft being used, particularly small aircraft, being used to smuggle a variety of drugs across areas of the Caribbean. We've certainly had issues with aircraft that were suspected of doing that, landing and perhaps in unsuccessful ways in the country. So I am particularly happy that the bill seeks to include aircraft and treat them as an extension of the territory in the same way as we treat Cayman Islands registered vessels or ships. And similarly, Mr. Speaker, recognizing and empowering the Coast Guard and the Commandant as well is a very useful addition in that respect. I would also join with my colleague, the member from Bordentown West, in commending the excellent work of all of our law enforcement authorities and the really amazing development of the Coast Guard and the equipment and the effectiveness and the professionalism that they bring to keeping this country safe and utilizing the new powers they'll have in respect to this to keep our children and our families away from the effects of illicit drugs. Mr. Speaker, with those few comments, again, I support the bill. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? If not, then I'll invite the Honourable Attorney General to exercise his right of reply.
I do thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thanks to the honourable members who spoke and those who have expressed their support otherwise, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, just in response to the honourable member from Bordentown West, the treaty, in fact, entered into force in 2008, as he correctly pointed out. And just for what it's worth, it is a treaty that is intended, Mr. Speaker, well, it says, among other things, that the parties shall cooperate to the fullest extent possible in combating illicit maritime and air traffic in and over the waters of the Caribbean area, consistent with available law enforcement resources of the parties and related priorities, in conformity with the international law of the sea and applicable agreements with a view, Mr. Speaker, to ensuring that suspect vessels and suspect aircraft are detected, identified, continuously monitored, and where evidence of involvement in illicit traffic is found, suspect vessels are detained for appropriate law enforcement action by the responsible law enforcement authorities. Mr. Speaker, the treaty itself seeks to build upon the work already undertaken by signatories to the United Nations Convention against illicit traffic in narcotics, drugs, and psychotropic substances, or the 1988 Vienna Convention. Mr. Speaker, the honourable member is correct in that while the United Kingdom is one of the state parties which have signed the Treaty of San Jose, it has not yet ratified the treaty, Mr. Speaker. The United States has taken the position that they would like to have it extended to the overseas territories at the appropriate stage and at the time of ratification. And so what they have invited, if you will, the Caribbean overseas territories to do is to ensure that they have the appropriate domestic legislation in place in order to be able to comply with the provisions of the treaty. Mr. Speaker, I think in this regard, I think the Turks and Caicos Islands might be ahead of us in terms of some of their amendments. We are certainly moving in that direction. And as far as I'm aware, some of the other OTs in the region are working on theirs. And so to answer the honourable member's question in that regard, it is not yet ratified, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in respect of his other observations, Mr. Speaker, I've always heard this discussion about disparity in terms of sentencing. I suspect, well, not suspect, I suggest, Mr. Speaker, maybe the best way for me to do that is to probably have a word with the Chief Justice and see whether they could sort of, I strongly suggest, Mr. Speaker, that they commission a review and provide empirical data to see whether or not there is any evidence to that effect. I know usually, Mr. Speaker, when the court is dealing with sentencing, some of the issue that they look at is the nature and seriousness of the offense, whether or not the person has a previous conviction, and they would have also, Mr. Speaker, be guided by a social inquiry report. And based on the outcome of all of that exercise, they would then look at the sentencing guidelines that has been crafted by the Chief Justice and see where that a particular person falls, what range a particular person falls into. But I am not in a position to say one way or the other that I am aware of any sort of a deliberate effort or otherwise in terms of how sentences are handed out based on the one's nationality or status or anything. I think the best way for me to do that and to help and to have the matter properly ventilated is to speak to the Chief Justice to see if we can probably look back at 5 years of data or something and assist us with that empirical evidence so that we can have an informed position on the issue. And so I undertake to do that, Mr. Speaker. I'll be seeing her tomorrow, and I certainly will suggest that that would be very helpful to do. And of course, I join with members, Mr. Speaker, in also commending the effort of our law enforcement agencies. It is true, as pointed out, that our borders tend to be somewhat porous, and that has brought about certain vulnerabilities, as we are aware. Contraband pouring into into the jurisdiction. The police, the Coast Guard, Mr. Speaker, are always looking at ways, and the National Security Council and the Cabinet, always looking at ways to enhance the security of the borders, looking at drones, looking at other measures, Mr. Speaker. Government continue to provide finances to the Coast Guard and the police to try and enhance the security of the border. And so, Mr. Speaker, as the honourable member pointed out, the numbers seem to be trending in the right direction when it comes on to interdiction and so on. So long may that continue. But, Mr. Speaker, this piece of legislation, once passed by this Parliament, will also help to enhance the security of the borders and hopefully will help to drive down the numbers even more. So I really thank honourable members for their support and we look forward to safe passage.
The question is that a bill shortly entitled the Misuse of Drugs Amendment Bill 2024 be given a second reading. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. I believe the ayes have it. Accordingly, the Misuse of Drugs Amendment Bill 2024 has been given a second reading.
Traffic Amendment Bill 2024.
I recognize the Honorable Attorney General. No. Oh, okay. Honorable Minister, can you save me the embarrassment? The next time round, do you also have coverage of the public transport bill? Okay. I recognize the Honorable Minister for Planning, Agriculture, Housing, Infrastructure, Transport and Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the second reading of a bill entitled the Traffic Amendment Bill 2024.
The bill has been duly moved. Does the Honorable Minister wish to speak thereto?
Yes, sir. Mr. Speaker, honorable members, today I rise to speak about the upcoming amendments to our Traffic Act 2021 revision through the Traffic Amendment Bill 2024. The bill is a cornerstone in our efforts to create a safer, more efficient, and more inclusive system for the Cayman Islands. Mr. Speaker, one of the key provisions in the bill is the ability to register a vehicle on behalf of disabled persons. This change is vital for ensuring that members of our disabled community have the same access to mobility as everyone else, reinforcing our commitment to inclusive and equality. The bill supports a crucial enhancement to our emergency response framework by classifying the regiment and the Coast Guard and emergency vehicles. The designations will ensure that these essential services can operate with necessary priorities, allowing them to respond swiftly, effectively in emergencies. In our pursuit of the road safety amendments also facilitates an increase in a ticketable offense. This includes penalties for the improper display of registration plates and the misuse of Jake's brakes by heavy trucks. By addressing these issues, we aim to promote regulatory compliance, and responsible driving. Another fundamental aspect of the amendments is the provision for establishing regulations related to the determinant point system. Such a system will serve as an effective tool for promoting responsible driving habits and ensuring accountability, ultimately contributing to the reduction of traffic violations. Additionally, the amendment supports clarifying the wording concerning the restrictions on using and holding mobile phones and other handheld devices while driving. Clear and precise language is in the area essential to combat and distract driving, which remains a significant contributor to the road accidents in the Cayman Islands. Mr. Speaker and honorable members, as part of the ongoing efforts to these important changes to come, we have laid a solid foundation. We have been taking a cross-sectional approach to bring the general public on board, in line with the vision of safer roads. For example, you would recall us rolling out the collaborative efforts of the Road to Zero campaign through the National Road Safety Committee to ensure that the general public understands the importance of road safety. This was also supported by the road safety improvements, such as work done on Spot Street, the site of the 6 of 8 road fatalities that occurred this year. Progress has also been made on our works to introduce vehicle safety standards for the Cayman Islands. Furthermore, we will be updating relevant traffic regulations and public passenger vehicle regulations following the changes to the preliminary legislation, fostering a more transportation framework. To ensure we are best positioned for these changes, we are also conducting an organization review to improve the governance and transportation as a whole. This includes through evaluation of the Department of Vehicles and Driver License, the Public Transport Unit, National Roads Authority. As part of the comprehensive overhaul, we will also be laying the green paper of the public transport in this sitting, which we did this morning. Reinforcing the commitment to a transformative approach to our transport system in the Cayman Islands. Mr. Speaker, honorable members, the change in traffic amendment bill and our groundwork are all designed to provide a strong foundation and important proposals made to the public transport bill. Together, they represent a comprehensive approach to improve our transportation system, prioritizing accessibility, safety, efficiency for all citizens. I urge the esteemed House to support the amendments as they will solidify the work that we have been doing in the last few years. Thank you for your attention and your commitments.
Does any other member wish to speak? The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, I rise to make a few short or ask for a few clarifications on the Traffic Amendment Bill 2024. Speaker, I thank the Minister for bringing these amendments, and I think you heard the cheering from the halls when he spoke about the Jake brakes that rattles everybody's windows and homes at all hours of the morning and night. But Mr. Speaker, as I went through the bill, there was a couple of things. I think in Clause 4, it speaks to amend the Section 14.2a of the Principal Act in order to provide, amongst other things, that a license may be issued for 5 years where a vehicle is a new vehicle, which is being registered in the Cayman Islands for the first time. And I fundamentally have no issues with that, Mr. Speaker. What I want to inquire about is I don't know if the minister can find this out. If a car is written off by the insurance company, does the insurance company turn in the plates, or is it registered at the licensing department that the car has been written off? And my concern here, why I ask that question, is because 5 years is a long time. So if a vehicle is purchased brand new, gets written off by the insurance company, a garage buys it, they patch it back with 2 or 3 other wrecked vehicles they had, and then next thing you know, you have a vehicle that has a potential to malfunction. We have all seen the vehicles on the side of the road with the lights flashing and windshield wipers going off, and the poor driver standing outside wondering what's happening, or we've seen vehicles just catching fire. And one can only assume that these were, without any evidence of massive recalls, that these were vehicles that were repaired and this malfunctions happen. So 5 years is a long time if a vehicle has been written off or in a major accident and has been rebuilt or repaired and put back on the road. I don't know if it is, possibly that it is law, but I don't know if it's mandatory or a practice for the insurance companies to notify the licensing department or to turn in the plates. If the insurance company pays the person off of the vehicle, do they receive the plates and turn them in? I don't have the answers for this, but I think it's a genuine concern. And I guess Clause 5, I just wanted to confirm 2 things, and it speaks to, Clause 5 is Section 25 that deals with the new residents and visitors to Cayman. The prescribed age, I assume that assumption is that it makes to ensure that the person is 17 years or older. And the second thing is, how did we arrive at the United Kingdom, Gibraltar, Guernsey, Isles of Man, and Jersey? I can guess, but perhaps you could shine some light on that for us. With those few questions or clarifications, the official opposition have no issues with the bill and support it otherwise. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? The Honourable Member for Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In regards to the traffic amendment bill, looking at definitions, I would like to place a question, or more ask a question, as it pertains to emergency vehicles that my honourable friend and colleague has defined. I know that it was discussed and received consent, whether or not, or why this decision was made to not include the vehicles operated by the cadets, understanding that in the event of a national emergency, the cadets are also a part of NEOC, and they actually play a key role tying into the broader vision for where the cadets actually play in emergency response.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? The Honourable Member for Newlands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support the bill and to thank the Honourable Minister for bringing this bill with these amendments to the Traffic Act. I know that the committee had been established, it must be more than 2 years ago now, to propose these amendments. And I certainly welcome them and join everyone else in welcoming anything that will improve the safety of our roads for our people. And, you know, I was reminded recently, driving home and listening to a low boy driving in front of me, that this issue of the compression brakes have been something that have been raised often as well. We hear that so often in our various communities and constituencies. People complaining about, you know, the use of compression brakes. I know it's described as Jake brakes here, but to be frank, sir, there are many other nationalities that use it, so it might be. I sort of feel it's a little bit unfair to refer to it just as that, although I know colloquially that's how it's described. But yes, I have heard these, and as I said recently, I heard drivers double clutching, doing it. Obviously, it's not as annoying as when they flip the switch and use the compression brakes. But I would appeal to operators of vehicles that, you know, while they may do it on the main roads and think that it doesn't impact anyone beyond there, beyond other road users, it really does impact all of our communities, you know, because the sound travels, particularly when it's downwind, it travels over extensive periods, or distances rather. So that particular issue is, I think, one which, while not a safety issue, it is absolutely an issue relating to the quiet enjoyment of homes in our communities. One question that I would like the minister to clarify in relation to, on his winding up, Mr. Speaker, is in relation to Clause 12, which was the amendments to Section 78, or it was a new Section 78, I think. There's a reference in the proposed subsection 5 there, 5A. It says using a mobile telephone or other handheld device includes the following. There are a number of things listed which I agree with. But one says illuminating the screen, which sounds a little bit vague, and I would like the minister if he could possibly clarify exactly what that's intended to cover. I also would like, Mr. Speaker, if the minister could clarify whether or where we are with proposals on speed cameras and these types of things that will help to address some of the awful rates of traffic accidents that we have in this country. It seems that, you know, every month we are recording higher and higher rates of traffic accidents. And recently, I think it was clarified that we had reached some astronomical level of rates of accidents. I don't remember the exact number, but I want to say it was something like 94 accidents in 1 week or something like that. And Mr. Speaker, we know that these things arise from people speeding, people driving carelessly, getting distracted, and I think people who are driving whilst under the influence. In particular, the speeding seems to be, in equal measure, a big part of the problem. So I'd like if the minister could speak in his winding up on this bill in relation to the issues of the speed cameras and trying to address those, because I think that will be really helpful. The country has a good police service. You know, there are times when there are complaints, but the reality is they cannot be everywhere all the time. And an effective speed camera system will help to mitigate, if not eliminate, the practice of speeding on our roads, which we know has very detrimental effects in terms of the rates of accidents and in many, many cases, the outcomes. Mr. Speaker, I had the awful experience just recently of being parked 100 feet away from a fatal accident in my community, and finding out that a young man, a young person, had lost his life, lost his potential, and just imagining how the family would feel, and his friends, and the community in which he lived. It's just an awful thing. We must do everything we can, Mr. Speaker, to prevent these types of things from happening. So I look forward to, with those words, Mr. Speaker, I look forward to the Minister in his winding up, if he can outline the approach being taken, particularly in relation to the speed cameras. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? The Honourable Member from Bordentown West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to also lend my voice supporting this bill. And before doing so, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the previous minister who was responsible for public transport, the Honourable Member for Georgetown Central, for the report that he did, or the report that he had commissioned that was done by Deloitte. It's a 154-page report, quite lengthy, but I can tell the members of this House and the public it's actually very informative. And it gave us a deep, honest look in terms of what the public transport system was like. And also want to give credit to the current minister for, I guess, taking the consideration of that report and then starting the process of implementing some of the changes that came out of that report. But, Mr. Speaker, the public transport system. Oh, this is the traffic one, sorry. Hold on, wrong notes, I apologize. Sorry, Mr. Speaker. I apologize, I was looking at my wrong notes. I was looking at the public transport bill, I apologize. I guess everyone knows I'll be speaking on that one now. Mr. Speaker, I rise to lend my voice on the traffic amendment bill that we have before this House. And one of the things, Mr. Speaker, that I want to touch on first and foremost, and I know the bill spoke about safety, was the Honda Fits. Mr. Speaker, for some strange reason, we need to start looking into some of these cars, and I hate to be singling out the Honda Fit, but it seems not just in Cayman, but elsewhere across the Caribbean, these vehicles are developing a reputation that, I don't want to use the word unsafe, but I can't find a better word at this point, so I guess I'll put it out there, but something needs to be looked into those Honda Fits. One of the things, Mr. Speaker, is that when you look at the actual accident rates, they have actually also gone up. And just to put it in context, and again, looking at the company statistics, and just to put these numbers in context, in 2016, there was 1,204 motor vehicle accidents on the road. In 2017, it was 2,739. 2018 was 2,409. 2019 was 2,806. 2020 was 2,167. In 2021 was 2,633. And in 2022, 2,915. And last year for 2023, Mr. Speaker, the number is 3,169. Now, Mr. Speaker, when you look at the culture, and the number that jumped out to me the most, Mr. Speaker, was granted while it was less than other years, was 2020 during COVID, when we literally had a lockdown, but we still had over 2,000 accidents on the road during 2020. It says something about there's an overall culture of, I don't know if it's safety or unsafety, but there's something cultural when so many people complain about traffic in Cayman, being stuck in traffic, being stuck in bumper-to-bumper traffic, but they still find a way to basically get those cars to touch. And, yeah, and Mr. Speaker, one of the things I also want to touch on is the number of fatalities that was recorded during the same period, during that same period. In 2016, Mr. Speaker, there were 10 fatalities on the road. 2017, there were 3. 2018, there was 8. 2019, there was 8. 2020, there was 9. 2021, there was 9. 2022, there was 14. 2023, there was 9. And so far this year, I understand there's been 11 fatalities, with just 2 happening recently. And Mr. Speaker, when you also consider, just for comparative purposes, the size of Cayman population and how does that compare to other jurisdictions, just to put that in context, when you're looking at, we're doing about maybe 9 accidents per 100,000. In places in the US, New York is 5.2 fatalities per 100,000. California is 9.7 fatalities per 100,000. And Florida, for some strange reason, Mr. Speaker, is 15.4 fatalities per 100,000. But one of the things that also jump out at me, Mr. Speaker, as we're looking at the analysis, is that while the overall rate in the US was 13 deaths per 100,000, when you look at the southern states, for whatever reason, Mississippi was 25.4, or the worst one. Louisiana was 17.8, Kentucky was 17.3, North Carolina was 14.7, and South Carolina was 20.7. It seems that there's also a cultural issue within the southern states as opposed to the northern states or the busier states. But nonetheless, Mr. Speaker, when you do look at the Cayman Islands numbers and compare to those bigger jurisdictions, it is definitely something that we need to look at where there needs to be a cultural issue. The other thing I want to touch on briefly, Mr. Speaker, is the exam itself and the test itself. For some strange reason, Mr. Speaker, there seem to be a lot of people on the road who just can't drive. And it behooves me to some extent, and I know this is where road rage come into context, because some people out there get very ticked off when they come across some of these inconsiderate drivers. And some of them, Mr. Speaker, which I'll be touching on in the public transport bill, is the actual bus drivers. They have a tendency sometimes, Mr. Speaker, to just pull off wherever they want to pull off and just pull out on the road whenever they want to pull out. And when you're in a 40-mile-per-hour zone, it actually becomes a problem sometimes. And that spot straight, as the minister identified, has been one of the issues them out there to directly deal with that. But outside of that, Mr. Speaker, the only thing I like the minister to ask during his wrap-up is in terms of the traffic management panel. I mean, how many meetings have they been having? Have there been any reports? And also, as the member for Newlands mentioned earlier, if there was an update on the speed camera ticketing test system. I understand that was something that was started quite a while back that was being looked at, and it'd be good to get the public to have an update on that. And one of the things I just want to also touch on, Mr. Speaker, on a lighter note, is NRA. They have been doing some really good work. Sometimes, I know, thankless to some members of the public, but I really want to thank Managing Director Edward and his team, and I also have to single out Mrs. Ellison. That's his minister, that's his name, Ellison? Is it Ellison from NRA? Ellington, sorry. Ellington, we have a different nickname for him, but I wanted to put a proper name in the record. Ellington Forbes. He has been doing an outstanding job and has been very, very responsive when we do call about issues that require road work and stuff within our community. So I just want to go on the record to thank the NRA and Director Howard and his team, but also Mr. Ellington for really, really being very responsive. With that said, Mr. Speaker, I do support the traffic amendment bill. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? The Honourable Member for Savannah.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to give this traffic amendment bill my full support and to thank the minister. It's been a long time coming, and I'm happy to see the bill for an act to amend the Traffic Act to provide for vehicle safety standards and to provide for miscellaneous updates of the Act. Mr. Speaker, it's not a day anyone expect to hear of a loved one's loss of life. I'm one who knows that grief. I ask all those who drive recklessly to consider their lives and those of others. Mr. Speaker, it's the Christmas season, so please drive with caution. I thank the minister again, and I fully support this Traffic Amendment Bill 2024. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? The Honourable Minister, Deputy Premier and Minister for Tourism.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll be rather quick. I want to opine further on the member from Savannah to be in concert with her with congratulating the Honourable Minister for his hard work with his team over the past few years to try to address some of the traffic issues that we have from a comprehensive public transport bill as well as a traffic amendment bill. He has been working tirelessly in respect to all areas that relate to traffic and vehicular usage on our roads, from the development of new roads to the behavior of persons on the road to the behavior of persons who use transport or license to transport individuals. You can see that by the testament of the many clauses within this bill. And I know in respect to the national security concerns, he was a major advocate for that report. And if you've heard him say in the last year when he presented to this House, the safety mechanisms that are coming in place to make our roads safer. But I must say that though it may not feel that way, things are progressively changing in respect to how we deal with things in the road. And these changes in the law will improve them. And I think many of the causes have been because of our ad hoc approach to development over the many years. And as the governments continue to develop a national strategic plan of potentially outsourcing to the different parts of the island, different types of development, the opportunity for more balanced traffic options and reduction will become more fruitful. And again, I congratulate the Honourable Minister for his hard work and his commitment, particularly to those persons in Northside and the Eastern Districts. And I think that's where his passion is developed from in respect to his commitment to reducing the ills of the traffic on our roads. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? If not, then I'll invite the Honourable Minister to exercise his right of reply.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, almost seemed like all these should have been PQ questions. But I want to thank the House for their support. Mr. Speaker, when we took over the traffic, one of the main things I tried to be able to see what we could do and how we could improve this traffic amendment. And we understand the situation, and trust me, we get the reports on how many accidents, how many deaths, and yes, we do have a situation where some people have said that they came on national car, these Honda Fits seem to be the main culprit on the road most of the time. Mr. Speaker, I just want to jog back to the opposition leader. I'd mentioned his first part of it. I think it was about the age, and that was actually signed through an MOU that was signed with the UK in 2023. It was started before that, but I think it was signed in 2023, where anyone in the UK could exchange with their driver's license, because we had a lot of the kids that were overseas that were having opportunity of getting license and coming back to Cayman and could go back and get their license improved there. And I think that was started under the minister at the time. Yeah, for the MOU. And and let's round back up on the section where we talked about the speed cameras. Mr. Speaker, the speed cameras have been something that I myself have been waiting on and for quite some time, and I'm happy to say that the business case is practically been dusted, and it's going to national security in the first part of the year coming up here. And from there on out, we should be able to roll out these speed cameras. It's something everybody I've been hearing from the eastern side of the island have been talking about how there were extra calming measures, and hopefully that'll help us out. And I know the NRA himself has been looking at different types of calming measures, and I do sympathize with the minister from the member from Newlands when he talked about the tragedy of the deaths and stuff, and how we could actually try to help. Sorry, sir. And how we could help out, and how do we improve our road safety a lot more. Mr. Speaker, as I talked about first, this is a working document. This is a step forward. I'm not saying it is it is the best document. We know every law that we bring down here is going to need some other improvement as we continue to move along. But then, Mr. Speaker, one section, I think one of the members actually asked me about the cadets also, and emergency vehicles. And a section of the traffic regulations under 13G actually gives the director the power to allow other vehicles to be able to be on the road. But I think there's some clarity that needs to be there, because I think the cadets actually works on with the hazard management, and the hazard management is already labeled in that law already. So the director has a responsibility that he can give them that to add the blue lights on to their vehicles. Mr. Speaker, the amendments of this, we spoke about the Jake's brakes, have been something that I've heard through this halls, through cabinet, through caucus, through meetings on the east end from West Bay to Georgetown. Everywhere I go, I keep hearing people talk about that. And I know it's been coming for quite some time that, people have been asking the government to look at doing something about this. And here we are today looking forward into that to try to see how we can get something to improve this. But Mr. Speaker, one of the main concerns of this is to make sure that our some of the emergency vehicles, as we spoke about, that were in the traffic, in the law here, to allow them to be able to, in a law. Well, I mean, as my member said, to my right here, shine bright, so I'll just leave it as that. But Mr. Speaker, I just want to thank, on that last note of the shine bright, I just want to thank the members for their support. And there's a section, sorry, I didn't quite catch that part where you're talking about with the 5 years. Sorry if I didn't. So we can take it off the record. Okay. Mr. Speaker, I just want to thank all the members that spoke, those that didn't speak, for their full support. And I think all those that spoke were really, was all merited, and we've taken notes for that. And then any changes that we need to look at, we are happy to make some of the changes in the regulations if we can, and take it forward from there. Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker.
The question is that a bill shortly entitled Traffic Amendment Bill 2024 be given a second reading. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. I believe the ayes have it. The Traffic Amendment Bill 2024 has been given a second reading.
Public Transport Bill 2024.
I recognize the Honorable Minister for Planning, Agriculture, Housing, Infrastructure, Transport and Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the second reading of the bill entitled Public Transport Bill 2024.
The bill has been duly moved. Does the Honorable Minister wish to speak thereto?
Yes, sir. Mr. Speaker, as our population and economy have rapidly grown, our transportation system has struggled to keep pace, leading to increased congestion and safety risks. It is essential that we develop a modern public transport alternative that is both efficient and effective. I address you today with the optimism and a commitment to transforming and transportation landscape of the Cayman Islands. Today we introduce the Public Transport Bill, which marks an exciting milestone for further development in the Cayman Islands. By granting public transportation its own standalone legislation, we are laying a solid foundation for improvements in efficiency and operations, and notable for the Public Transport Board. Additionally, by expanding the Cabinet's regulatory powers, we empower the public transport officer with enforcement capabilities, further enhancing the safety and order on our roads. This will also provide immense support to the upcoming Traffic Act amendments that we just talked about. Our green paper on the future of public transport is a beacon of our evolution. I extend my gratitude to our secondees that were here from the United Kingdom for their work on the green paper, which will serve as a guiding light for the transforming our public transport system into one that is efficient, reliable, and environmentally friendly. The Green Paper sets out for the first time the government policy's intention to develop a new bus service initiative for 3 routes in Grand Cayman: West Bay to Georgetown, Georgetown to the Eastern Districts, and Georgetown Circular. These services will be the modern, affordable, reliable, and accessible. They will operate alongside the existing omnibus service, which will evolve into our community bus network that will complement and enhance the new service. Mr. Speaker, to succeed, we will require new infrastructure, including bus depots, terminals, and priority lanes. Additionally, we will need qualified staff and drivers and management, and while creating a sustainable and high-quality employment opportunities for Caymanians, we are exploring various models of new bus systems, including government-private sector partnerships and leveraging digital technologies for enhancing convenience and accessibility. The Ministry will continue to develop the business case for the new bus service, and I welcome feedback from all the honorable members. Mr. Speaker, while these initiatives take shape, we will continue to do the groundwork. We're also actively updating the relevant traffic regulations and public passenger regulations that will strengthen the public transport bill, all while tabling the Traffic Amendment 2024 in the sitting of this House. We remain steadfast in our mission to introduce a robust vehicle safety standards tailored specifically for the Cayman Islands. These standards are a testament to our dedication to ensuring that every vehicle on our roads are equipped to protect its passengers to the highest degree possible. We are also conducting an organization review to enhance the governance of the transportation as a whole. This includes a total evaluation of the Department of Vehicles and Driver's License, DVDL, the Public Transport Unit, and the National Roads Authority. Today's bill brings about a significant reorganization of the Public Transport Board, enhancing its flexibility and designating the ministry responsible for transport as the new chair. As the new ministry responsible for public transport, we would like to take the whole of this opportunity to express the heartfelt gratitude to the current chair, Ms. Rosa Harris, the Director of Tourism, for her outstanding decade of leadership as the chair. We also extend our appreciation to all the past members of the Public Transport Board for their unwavering dedication and exemplary service over the years. Mr. Speaker, we are committed to building upon a valuable contributions they have made. I implore each of you to join us in the collaborative efforts as we strive to develop a transformative transportation system that not only meets but exceeds our expectations for safety, efficiency, and sustainability. Together, we can pave the way for a brighter future in public transport. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank all the members for their consideration and their commitments to this transformative journey that we're all on.
Does any other member wish to speak? Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, rise to just offer some short comments on the Public Transportation Bill, Transport Bill 2024. I thank the Honourable Minister for his statement this morning and for the contribution. And I understand that this is all a part of advancing our public transport for the needs in the future. And obviously, this is a good start. Previously, the public transport was covered under the traffic law and made it very difficult to effect change within the public transport sector. This has a lot of evolution to go, I do feel. It has to reach to the point where the public transport, in my opinion, will become an authority, and where investigations of accidents or incidents will be handled by public transport authority officers, and the officers would also have the ability to issue tickets on the spot for infractions, etc. I've gone through the bill, and it's fairly basic. It doesn't take complete control of the operators and overrule. It doesn't overrule the traffic law when it comes to licensing of vehicles and infractions and that sort of stuff. But it's a good start. I want to make a couple of recommendations to the minister, and if I overlooked it in the bill, then I apologize. And most of these have to do with the regulations, and I know that it's spelled. You know, there's a list of items that the regulations would cover, but one I didn't see and I think is important is a code of conduct. I think if we could develop a code of conduct for the public transport officers and taxi and bus drivers that they would all sign once receiving their licenses, if we could include that. The other one that I'm happy to see, because this has been a major issue of contention, is that there will now be clear penalties outside of the traffic law for things such as not following your route or rude behavior, those sorts of things. And perhaps we could follow the amendments, the new amendment to the traffic law, in adding into the regulations here, or into the bill actually, the opportunity for a what was described in the traffic law as a demerit system. That way they know that if you're off your route twice, then the third time you lose or you're suspended, etc. And that way, with a code of conduct and receiving a handbook of sorts outlining the demerit system and the penalties, they have no arguments when they face penalties or suspensions, etc. The other item that perhaps isn't one for the bill, but there has to be some policy, some process in place, understanding and appreciating that some routes are much more lucrative than other routes. That persons who have done their time, let's say, in some of the less lucrative routes, and routes become open, whether drivers' vehicles break down for extended periods of time, or other issues, that persons can't simply reserve that spot. That at that point, someone gets perhaps in the order of how long they've had their license, gets an opportunity to move into those more lucrative routes. Something else that we struggled with, and I think they continue to struggle with, but there has to be some attention paid to it, and understanding that the public bus must be owned by a Caymanian. It is my understanding, or there is a wide belief, that a lot of the buses are not owned by Caymanians, but in fact purchased by the driver, who may not be Caymanian, and have worked out a deal to lease the route from the Caymanian bus operator who supposedly owns the bus. So, these are the concerns we hear out there. I don't know, it's not something you can put in the bill, not something you can write into the bill, but certainly something we should be aware of and be conscious of. As I said, Mr. Speaker, this is a good start. I see a much wider vision for public transport, but this is a step in the right direction, and we offer our full support.
Does any other member wish to speak? The Honourable Member for Borden Town West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I think I have the right bill this time. That's what I may have notes all over the place. Mr. Speaker, as I intimated earlier, I just want to start out by thanking my good friend from Georgetown Central, the Honourable Minister, for when he was in charge of public transport, where he actually commissioned the report that was done by Deloitte. It's a 154-page report. It's quite detailed. It's actually quite informative, and I would encourage all members of this House, if they haven't done so already, to read it, and also to the members of the public. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I'd also like to now congratulate the new minister for the seamless transition where he took over this portfolio and hit the ground running, and that we can actually start by moving public transport, recognizing the more seriousness of it. As the Honourable Leader of Opposition stated earlier, this was an issue that was dealt with under the traffic law, and it's over time now that it also have its own bespoke legislation to some extent. With that said, Mr. Speaker, I welcome it, but I just want to make a few observations. Again, this was coming from the report. And one of the things that jumped out at me, Mr. Speaker, in the report was that there were a total of 104 buses that was servicing between West Bay, Georgetown, or basically Grand Cayman. And the distribution of those seats, Mr. Speaker, are as follows. West Bay had 995 seats, or 60% of the seats. Georgetown had 48. The eastern to Bordentown had 232 seats, and the north side, Bordentown, had 271 seats. For total amount of seats, as per the report, Mr. Speaker, is 1,646. And like I said, West Bay had 60%, but the Eastern District actually had 37% of the seats. And that's one of the things, Mr. Speaker, that kind of jumped out at me when I also considered that during the 2021 census, the total population in the Eastern District of Bordentown, east and north side, was 18,493. Now, that was the census that was done in 2021. And by the end of 2023, the population actually increased by 3,387, or 18%, to 21,980. So when you look at the amount of population, Mr. Speaker, and the level and the number of seats available in the Eastern District, it is clear now for us to take public transportation serious. It is something that we need to look at to encourage more people to actually get into the bus business. And equally, Mr. Speaker, when you also look at the overall population itself, it actually increased by 13,633 since the census. And during the same period of time, the number of cars imported only increased by 4,570. So there is already a mismatch between the growth in population and, in a sense, the number of seats available to transport the population. And nonetheless, I think all of us can agree that building more roads outside of the east-west arterial will not be the solution. And we need to start taking a more sensible approach in terms of looking at the overall public transport system. Thus the reason why I welcome this initiative and also be looking at enhancing it by itself. I have filed an amendment and understand you have accepted the amendment, Mr. Speaker. So I want to thank you in advance.
It's not for me to accept the amendment. I simply waive the notice.
Yeah, thanks, sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that correction. And we have made a change. The one concern I had with the bill was the chief officer in the ministry being designated as the chairperson. I think for it to have the gravitas of this new unit and to show some level of seriousness, I think we need to have, like other public authority bodies, an independent outside chairperson from the private sector. And with the amendment that we have made, actually will reflect that, and then have those civil servants that are working on the committee as ex officio members. I mean, outside of that, I was pretty okay with the bill. The one thing, Mr. Speaker, that I also want to touch on is the culture. I mean, I think if most people, a lot of people would be willing to use the public transport system if they know exactly when the buses are going to arrive. And I think from a technology standpoint, where you put GPS on the buses or there's an app, people can know exactly, well, this is what time I need to be at the bus stop, so I can catch a bus, and people are not sitting there and just wondering exactly what needs to be done. I think from the report itself, there was 185 bus stops across Grand Cayman, and I think we also need to look now at the distribution of those bus stops and see exactly where we can get more stops or a more central location in a more safe area, so at least we can start encouraging more people to take the bus. I personally would love to walk out of my house. It takes me less than 100 meters to be to the top of the road, grab a bus, and just come right down to Parliament and save myself the gas. But again, Mr. Speaker, one of the other issues that we have is the late nights of the bus, in the sense that for people who are working in shift, when after certain hours it's very difficult to get a bus. And from that standpoint, we're forcing people who are coming here to work, in essence, to go and get a car. So these are the kind of things that we need to look at holistically in terms of what service that we can get a bus, the frequency of the service that we can have, and start encouraging more members of the public to actually take the bus. Another thing that I would like to touch on, Mr. Speaker, is to some extent multi-use license. I mean, I've had reports from people who work at the airport to say that, listen, after a certain time when the there are no planes in or the airport is closed or there's little activity, if they are able to use their, I guess, a license to operate at the airport to basically do other work. I don't know if that's something that the government will look at or consider, but at a minimum, it may probably reduce the amount of use, or maybe those are the individuals that can actually take over the late shift to some extent. But if we can find a way to get that balance and encourage more people into it. One of the things, Mr. Speaker, is that when you also do look at the profile of many people who work at the airport and also in this business, a lot of them are also our retirees. And I think to some extent that we need to, I know the Honorable Member for West Bay West, in a previous life, in a previous role, I tried his best to encourage as much cooperation between a lot of the operators and so forth. And that is one of the things I think that we need to move forward with. At the end of the day, while businesses do drive on competition, more can actually be done or achieved through cooperation. And sometimes there's a dog-eat-dog kind of mentality among some of the operators, them that in the collective does not serve their best interests. So that's one of the things that we need to look at. But outside of that, Mr. Speaker, I just want to welcome the Minister for this initiative and thank the previous Minister for the work that they have started. And I would encourage everyone to read the report, but this is something that is long overdue. And I know for the public, the frustration is there. Rome wasn't built in a day, but at least it is something now that hopefully this can allow us to take a more strategic approach towards public transport and hopefully find some solutions to the people of our country in this regard. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from West Bay West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister and one who stayed to do the work, I don't need to say that I support the Minister and these two pieces of legislation he has tabled today. Mr. Speaker, as a small island developing state, we come across problems as much as any metropolitan country. Traffic, transportation is one of them. We have to modernize our services, traffic services, we have to do so, and public transport needs to be something that must be dependable and safe. And sometimes we witness some of these small buses, 14-seaters, and even the 30-seaters. Up until yesterday, coming from East End, we were doing 40, and this 30-seater passed us flying. Well, I'm hearing that I drive slow. That's true, but I'm ahead of them. I don't believe that I need to do any more than 40. Sometimes I'll drive 25 and they'll keep blowing because the courtesy is practically nil anymore on the road. Something that we were once proud of. Now, Mr. Speaker, I'm hoping that with improvement, with a modern system, hopefully people will get used to using it and less need for the importation of vehicles. That's one of the hopes that I have for the future of our new system. It will take some education and urging and encouragement for the persons now in the system. And like you heard earlier, I tried, but no cooperation, and everybody's so independent-minded that they want to do their own thing, want to create their own rules, and this can't work. There has to be a system, there has to be rules that people abide by. And they think, because I can go buy a car, I can go buy a bus, it's me. True, they've got to pay for it, but they have to be mindful of others. That's something that I see waning in this country. So hopefully, with the, as I said, encouragement and a new system, some of the persons that just like to do their own thing will understand that new rules will make for a better system and a better quality of life. Mr. Speaker, I want to congratulate my minister on moving so fast. See how big he is. At 2 turnarounds, he's gone out of sight. Moves fast. And I do indeed want to thank him for his attitude of getting things done now. Let's do it now. No time to drag our feet and wait on this report and the next report and this consultant and the next consultant. You got them, you done it, let's get it done. And I want to thank our capable committees for their work. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members, we've reached the hour of interruption. Madam Premier, may I invite you to move the suspension of Standing Order 10-2 in order that business may continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move the suspension of Standing Order 10-2 to allow the business of the Honorable Parliament to continue until the hour of 6 p.m. today.
Thank you. The question is that Standing Order 10-2 be suspended to allow the business of the House to continue until 6 p.m. today. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. I believe the ayes have it. Accordingly, Standing Order 10-2 is suspended, and the business of the House will continue until 6 p.m. Does any other member wish to speak? The Honourable Member for West Bay Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to add my contribution to the Public Transport Bill 2024. This bill provides a framework to build a robust public transport unit that will ensure all residents can enjoy reliable public transport. Mr. Speaker, I have personal experience with our public transport system. As growing up, I came from a family that didn't have the luxury of a family car, and so growing up on this island, I became very familiar with our public bus system. Instead of driving, both of my parents were like you, Mr. Speaker. They were cyclists. And we caught the bus when we needed to go to the supermarket. I can still recall many days catching the bus to go by Kirk Plaza and walking to Kirk Home Center because there wasn't many routes. Mr. Speaker, it was a well-earned treat to walk from Kirk Plaza to Burger King because, again, there wasn't routes, but you look forward to the treat at the end of the day. Bringing those experiences from childhood to date, I'm still saddened to see that traversing around without having a car still has many challenges for our residents. And I'm pleased to see that this legislation, particularly Section 20 of the bill, will permit the establishment of regulations which will ensure the conditions of buses, fares charged, location, and marking of the bus stops, as well as safety provisions, are all enshrined in legislation. Assuming the bill is passed today, I'm wondering, just looking at my notes here, if the minister in his point of reply can just indicate just a timeline on how long you think it'll take before the regulations would be ready, since a lot of the safety features are set out to be in the regulations. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to commend the Honourable Minister and his policy team for ensuring that this draft bill also speaks to duty time limitations and that they are covered in the regulations, as our bus drivers should also have a legally determined maximum amount of working hours to ensure that accidents can be prevented from driver fatigue. As we all know, this is a duty that's very similar to airline pilots. Mr. Speaker, having a robust public transport system is one of the most effective methods of addressing traffic. And this bill is the start to accomplishing that. As the Leader of the Opposition raised the matter of the routes, I would also like to reiterate that the whole area of route allocations, I'm hoping will be addressed and fairly allocated. I'm sure that the Minister is aware that the routes currently are not designed in a way that encourages the average citizen to catch the bus to work and drop the children to school, or take a lunch hour and catch a bus to Industrial Park to visit one of the retail stores. My last point about the bill is that in Section 4, under the functions of the board, it seeks to include an enforcement provision to ensure that the operators comply. And going back to the routes, I do look forward to having enforcement, as the Leader of the Opposition previously mentioned. Mr. Speaker, there are ongoing concerns that the allocation of routes are not fairly distributed. We have operators who own more than one bus, and all of those buses are on the routes with heavy passenger loads. Meanwhile, a sole trader with one bus is on one of the least traveled routes. A route in West Bay that takes you on the Harkwell bypass will not give that operator the same earnings as an operator on the route to 7 Mile. So, Mr. Speaker, it is good to know that fairness, reliability, along with safety will all be addressed if this bill is approved today. With that being said, I am pleased to support this draft bill, as it will be a benefit to the entire island, and I commend the Minister and his team for all of their efforts.
Does any other member wish to speak? The Honourable Minister for Youth.
Mr. Speaker, thank you, sir. I rise just to give a brief contribution on this bill before the House, but also thank my colleague and his team for the hard work they've done on bringing this here. But Mr. Speaker, I've spoken about briefly in this House before, public transportation to the eastern districts, east end, north side, is literally non-existent. They come when they want, stop where they want, drop people off, turn around, go back, head back in town. And a bill like this will certainly help eliminate a lot of the frustrations that the people from my district, east end, and my colleagues' district, north side, from what they have experienced over the last several years. I've had many, many calls, many, many texts, many WhatsApp messages, voice notes of the type of service we receive in East End. And I'm glad that this bill is before this House so that we can get rid of those types of behavior that people going to East End experience on the road. Behaviors, for example, that at Everglow. Some of the bus drivers, they turn on at Everglow and then tell the people that board the bus going to East End at the bus depot here near to the Parliament. They don't tell them that they want to go into Everglow. It's when they get to Everglow, they tell them, okay, this is as far as we're going. And we can no longer tolerate that, sir. They'll get to the north side junction, turn around there, and they don't complete the route for either East End or north side. And I'm glad this bill is before the House so that the enforcement portion of this bill will put a stop to that, sir. Thank you so much.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? If not, then I invite the Honourable Minister to exercise his right of reply.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank everybody for their contributions towards the bill and for those for their fullest support that didn't speak on it. Mr. Speaker, one thing when I picked up this, I think it was a bit heavy on the baton when we did dealing with the traffic amendment and these and the tax operators and the bus operators is the first word that was told was, "Boy, you got your hands full with them." And Mr. Speaker, I want to say one of our first meetings that we had with the operators was a full boardroom. Maybe I must not, but somewhere around in the 50, 60 operators may have showed up. Mr. Speaker, and I sat and I listened to pretty much every single thing, all of their complaints heard, and I want to thank the Premier at the time, the Honourable Wayne Pannon, for giving me the opportunity to actually pick up the baton and run with this to help fix this serious issue that we had in the country. Mr. Speaker, one of the things that I found from the operators is they just wanted a listening ear. And they felt that they never had somebody that would just wanted to listen to them and carry on and complete. It was always, I don't know what was happening before, but I don't want to get into it. But Mr. Speaker, one thing that came back out of this is that majority of all of our bus operators now actually have all agreed to have the GPS system installed, to have a camera system installed into their buses. They all agree. They all understand the direction that we want to go. They all understand. They've all been up to date on all of the amendments that we're looking at here today. We've met with them several times now. And I must say, every time we meet with them, it is a large turnout of operators. Mr. Speaker, they all understand that there are what I would say the bad amongst the good, and sometimes everybody get paint with one brush. And those that turn around before and don't do their full route. But Mr. Speaker, one thing with us be able to interact, be able to put the GPS system in these vehicles is to be able to live time, be able to tell exactly which vehicles are not doing their routes. And then we can actually, the enforcement side of it is where we can start to penalize these individuals that aren't doing that. Mr. Speaker, out of the meetings that we had with them, the operators themselves came up and said that they were happy to post their numbers inside of all of the bus shelters for those that were on that route, so that if there was an individual standing there and he hadn't seen a bus at a time, he could look inside there and he could see a number and call one of the bus operators and say, "Hey, I'm at so-and-so section," letting you know. But again, taking it further in, Mr. Speaker, once the app is finished developed, everybody will have a lifetime app to be able to trace and track where the buses are at. So we don't see individuals having to just stand up alongside the road waiting 10, 20 minutes for a bus and not knowing if it's coming. Mr. Speaker, I have one direct lady that I always remember in my constituency of Northside that I know catches the bus every single day. And I always wonder where should be going every day. But she would call me and tell me if she hadn't seen a bus in the last 20 minutes, 30 minutes. And let me know which bus came, which bus that is that she's on. And she would call me and tell me if that bus didn't do its route and give me the number for that bus or whatever it is. Mr. Speaker, as one of the main things that we all knew that has plagued our people is that some of the bad driving that our bus operators do. All right? And the enforcement section now will be able to take care of this and be able to help where part they can start to ticket some of these bus operators and penalize them for that. Mr. Speaker, also, I think one of my members, if I'm not, I don't know if it was the leader of the opposition, spoke about the, or maybe it was the member for Bordentown West, about Caymanians owning the bus themselves. Caymanians are the ones that are allowed to own the bus, but they can't get a work permit for that individual to drive. Now, it is separate for the taxi operators. The taxi operators aren't allowed to get a work permit. It has to be a Caymanian that drives that bus, their taxis. Mr. Speaker, one of the things that we found also with the taxi operators is that was really bothering them is that their big yellow sticker that they always had in front of the bus saying taxi operators, and that was one thing that they wanted to fight to try to with the board to try to see how they could take it off, because they found out on times that when they weren't or heading home or they were off, that they were finding individuals flagging them down, and they were just crossing them, and they thought it was really disrespectful to just drive across someone, and then you would get a call and say, well, I just tried to stop taxi operator, but such with this number, and he just crossed by, he wouldn't stop. So, Mr. Speaker, some of the changes that we have made is to allow the taxi operators to remove that sticker from in the front, but they had to get the light where they can turn on and off to show the display that they are a taxi operator, and they have to display their license inside of the vehicle as it usually is, but still has to put a number on the side of the vehicle so that individuals can know what taxi that they have gotten on in case they have left something on board of it, forgotten something inside of one of the taxis. They can call the hotline number and just tell them that I have left this in taxi number 1. Mr. Speaker, I just want to, one of the other things the leader of opposition spoke about was the code of conduct. Mr. Speaker, I fully support a code of conduct. And Mr. Speaker, I know the operators that I know today, I don't find them having a problem supporting a code of conduct. They understand where we want to get to. Mr. Speaker, we understand that some of the routes aren't the most profitable routes. And I think the member for West Bay Central may have spoke about some of the routes coming from the highway. Mr. Speaker, when we sit down and we've talked to the operators, most of the operators that are operating on the western side of the island are happy with how their routes are set up. It is the operators that are mostly going to Moritz, all the way on Queens Highway, all the way to Rum Point, are those that are taking the South Sound route that we find that are saying that it's not profitable for them, or it's taking up more time and there's nobody on those routes at certain hours. Those are the ones that have came forward mostly. Not saying that there aren't individuals that are going west that would not want to make a change, but nobody has confronted from the West Bay side that actually runs buses and saying that they would like to make a change to the way that they're running their routes. At least personally, no one has come to me or mentioned it in any of our meetings that we've had. Huh? Mr. Speaker, as the House may know, my ministry has an overall analyst study of the public transport and DVDL and NRA in the light to possibly develop a Department of Transportation. This is the first step, and we see that if that comes to fruition and more changes will be needed to facilitate this. We also agree, as I mentioned too, is a lot of the suggestions today we have taken on, and these and other issues have been placed, and we can place these in the regulations, which are going to be coming up shortly. As the member for Bordentown West notes, as the green paper notes, we're aiming for a modern transportation system, including development of routes by the app and the payment through an app as well. These are all exciting changes that we see in the future of public transport. But one of the things, Mr. Speaker, we want to make sure is that I understand the off-night shifts, the late nights that people want to, and the early mornings when individuals need to get to, from west to east or north to south, whichever direction they need to go, but they have to be there on time. We've taken all of that in consideration, and one of the things that I would love to see done with the transport, with our operators, is to actually trying to set up some sort of co-op with them, or whatever they would like us to go down the road with. But Mr. Speaker, one thing I want to make sure of is that every change that we make here with our operators, whether it's the taxi operators or whether it is our bus operators, we make sure that they all have a stake in the say. And every one of them that showed up to the last 3 to 4 meetings, has come out and voiced their opinion and told us what they would support, what they don't like, and we have moved forward to where we're at here today. And I just want to thank them for all of their cooperation that they have been giving us, and it's not as bad as people thought it would have been when they first told me, boy, you're going to have a rough time dealing with them. I must say we're like a well-oiled machine working together now for one common goal. And I must applaud them for always being willing to come to the task anytime we call them and meet with us no matter where it's at. Whether it's, some of the meetings may happen at 7 at night, and some of them may happen at 8:30 in the morning. We seem to have a full house when it comes to that. Mr. Speaker, I know there are some committee amendments that will be coming up shortly too. I just want to thank everybody for their support and welcoming this new amendments, public transport bill to the House. Thank you.
The question is that a bill shortly entitled the Public Transport Bill 2024 be given a second reading. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. I believe the ayes have it. The Public Transport Bill 2024 has been given a second reading. I propose to take a short afternoon suspension. We will resume promptly at 10 minutes past 5 according to the clock in the chamber. The House is accordingly suspended until 10 past 5. Parliament is resumed.
Older Persons Amendment Bill 2024.
Before I call on the minister, to move the bill, I'd just like to acknowledge the presence of and to welcome Ms. Lucille Seymour, MBE, BEM, JP, former member of this House, to the chamber. Ms. Lucille was one of the pivotal individuals behind the Older Persons Law, or Act as it now is. She was one of the lobbyists for it, and she was also chairperson of the committee that helped create it, and then on to becoming chairman of the Council for Older Persons. So, thank you very much for all your hard work over many years, Ms. Lucille, and we are delighted that you're here to see, hopefully, the passage of even more enhancements to that important piece of legislation. When you're young, you don't think you get old. But if you don't die young, that will be your fate. So we all have a vested interest, I believe, in this bill and all that it contains. I recognize the Honorable Deputy Premier and Minister for Social. They change these things so often I can't remember. Social Development and Innovation.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the second reading of a bill entitled the Older Persons Amendment Bill 2024.
The bill has been duly moved. Does the Honourable Minister wish to speak thereto?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before I go into the contribution in respect to this bill, I too want to join you in recognizing this honorable lady, Ms. Lucille Seymour, to these chambers upon which she's familiar. And you are right, Mr. Speaker, in her crucial contributions to the legal framework around older persons, and I dare say social development as a whole. Mr. Speaker, interestingly enough, we've already, since the departure of the previous minister, had even made some further intended amendments and thinking of her and her contribution, and I think she will find it very fitting shortly. Mr. Speaker, I was to take your instructions earlier, but my mind failed me, and taking the opportunity to wish a special happy birthday to Miss Vernice Miles, whose birthday is today. She became the wonderful young age of 82. And before the day is out and my contributions are ended, I want to take that opportunity to wish her a very special happy birthday, Ms. Vernice. Mr. Speaker, I rise to present on behalf of the government a bill to amend the Older Persons Act 2017, a critical step in reaffirming our commitment to the well-being of one of the most valued groups in our society. Our older persons are not only the custodians of our heritage, but also the foundation upon which our present and future are built. It is our moral and legal obligation to ensure they are safeguarded, respected, and empowered to live with dignity in environments that promote care and support. Mr. Speaker, when I took over as Minister for Social Development, I was happy to see the work already in progress to support those most at risk in our community. The mountain of work that I have and will present at this sitting of the House was completed by the civil servants within the ministry. And I have to give credit to the former minister for his contribution to get us this far. These amendments are part of a broader effort to modernize our social development legislation, ensuring that it reflects the realities and the needs of the Cayman Islands today and into the future. Mr. Speaker, within the sitting of this House, I, on behalf of this government, will also be bringing forward legislative reform for children, prioritizing, safeguarding, and improving the process for children in care to be adopted. Together, these bills are a part of a cohesive strategy to strengthen protections for our most vulnerable and provide the framework necessary to support a thriving, resilient society. Mr. Speaker, we recognize that the Department of Children and Family Services is a critical entity in the social safety net of the Cayman Islands. As such, the ministry will be engaging in exercises to modernize the programs and services delivered by the department to make sure that they meet the needs of our community now and well into the future. This modernization isn't just about updating processes. It's about ensuring that the support we provide is aligned with the realities and the challenges faced by our families today. By addressing these needs, we are creating a stronger foundation for the well-being of all people. Mr. Speaker, in speaking about the programs to be provided by the department, there is an alignment between the vision of this legislation and the development of the Central Scranton Park. The park will be a space where older persons can come together in the community for recreational and social activities. Again, another area where our honorable guest and former member, Ms. Lucille Seymour, was a key component in developing. The department will be able to host their programs for older persons in a dedicated space within the Central Scranton Park. The contract for Phase 2 of this park was signed in November of this year, and we look forward to the partnership between the department and the park once completed. Mr. Speaker, safeguarding our older persons is not just about meeting legal obligations. It is about honoring their contributions and ensuring that they continue to thrive in a society that values every stage of their life. This bill is a testament to our collective duty to foster age-friendly communities. Mr. Speaker, this bill seeks to address a number of needs, which are as follows: to revise the definition of the term older person to ensure that it captures those who are 65 years of age or older, to rename the Council of Older Persons to clarify that they are a council for older persons, increases its function, and changes its membership. Also, to identify a department with responsibility for the subject of older persons, to remove the requirement for the maintenance of an older person's register, to increase the protection of the rights of older persons, to provide for the notification and investigation of abuse or neglect of older persons, to enable the issuance of an intervention order in cases where an older person lacks the capacity to make certain decisions, to establish the older person's tribunal for the purpose of determining complaints relating to access to rights of older persons and requirements imposed on mandatory reporters, and for the incidental and connected purposes. Mr. Speaker, data from the Cayman Islands 2021 census report highlights that a substantial demographic shift, which confirms that the population in the Cayman Islands is aging. From 2010 to 2021, the number of persons aged 65 and over almost doubled, increasing by 97.8%, which those aged 50 to 64 grew by 73%. Given this reality, it is imperative that we prioritize the needs and the well-being of our people, of our older persons, and ensure that we foster an age-friendly community. Mr. Speaker, you may remember the police officer who was jailed in 2020 for manipulating an older woman to sign her property over to him after he had been called out to a domestic incident at her home. This police officer was in the position of trust. However, he took advantage of his position and her vulnerabilities. The older woman eventually came forward and reported this to the police. There are other older persons in our community, Mr. Speaker, who are not coming forward for various reasons. And it's due to this that we must take responsibility for safeguarding older persons as a broader community. This is the aim of this amendment bill. There should be fewer cases like this one I'm referring to, and when they do occur, there must be adequate justice. Before I present the details of the bill, Mr. Speaker, please allow me to outline the ministry's consultation. Mr. Speaker, the Older Persons Act 2017 was commenced in July 2017. This act established the Council of Older Persons and the Older Persons Register. This act also outlined rights to which older persons should have access, but did not provide any remedial mechanisms for instances where rights are not upheld. It also does not have any supporting regulations, Mr. Speaker. At present, the Department of Children and Family Services is providing safeguarding support for older persons in the Cayman Islands. However, they do not have any legislative authority to conduct adequate assessments and investigations. In order to ensure this legislation is fit for purpose, the ministry formed a legal steering committee, which included membership from the Council of Older Persons via their chair and deputy chair, 2 community representatives who are older persons, as well as representatives from the Department of Children and Family Services and the Pines Retirement Home. The ministry conducted further consultation in August and September of this year with the full membership of the Council of Older Persons, staff of the Department of Children and Family Services, and other governmental entities, such as Cabinet Office and the Ministry of Health and Wellness. Consultation sessions were also held with non-governmental stakeholders, such as the Cayman Islands National Insurance Company, better known as Synico, and the Health Services Authority, known to many as HSA. It is based on this extensive consultation process, Mr. Speaker, that we are able to put forth this amendment bill to be considered by this Honourable House. Further, Mr. Speaker, there was advocacy from the community, particularly from Ms. Lucille Seymour, on behalf of the Council of Older Persons, for this legislation to go further, Mr. Speaker, and I agree. There are opportunities to take this further, and I want to ensure the Council and the public that I've asked the Ministry to begin focusing in this area in early 2025, including developing a framework for the role of a Commissioner of Older Persons. In the meantime, this Act provides much of what a Commissioner would do by ensuring that the rights of older persons are upheld and that there is a body, the Older Persons Tribunal, which can hear complaints where rights are not upheld. Mr. Speaker, I will touch on three primary aspects enhancing support for older persons, which will be addressed by this amendment bill. First, this amendment bill will clarify the roles of the critical entities in relation to support for older persons by enhancing the functions of the Council of Older Persons and ensuring the identification of the department in legislation which will be responsible for the subject of older persons. Second, this legislation will provide for the mandatory reporting of abuse and neglect and will establish provisions to safeguard older persons. Lastly, it will make provisions for an older persons tribunal. Mr. Speaker, this amendment bill will rename the Council of Older Persons to the Council for Older Persons. With this change, the composition of the council will include persons who are 55 and older, and this will ensure the council represents the need of those who are entering older age as well. The amendment will also clarify that the functions of the council, which can broadly be described as to focus on being a referral facility to provide information about available services and resources to older persons, and also to act as an advisor and advocate with government entities to influence policy and plan towards healthy aging and an age-friendly community. And lastly, to promote a better understanding of healthy aging and raise awareness about the issues and the concerns of older persons with a broader Cayman Islands community. In alignment with the work of the Councils for Older Persons, the amendment bill will, for the first time, identify a department with responsibility for matters pertaining to older persons. The role of this department will be to identify the changing needs of older persons and make representation to the ministry to address those needs, to develop and implement programs aimed at fostering age-friendly communities like Essential Scranton Park, to safeguard and promote the well-being of older persons. Mr. Speaker, this amendment bill will establish a legislative process for reporting abuse and neglect against older persons. This is similar to the provisions in the Child's Act 2012 revision and accounts for the amendments which are to be heard at the sitting of this House and Parliament in relation to that legislation. However, this part of the amendment bill makes specific provisions to support older persons. First, the amendment bill has considered, with input from consultation, a proposed list of professions which should be mandatory reporters. This list considers the professions which are more likely to interact with older persons, as well as be in a position where they may be privy to information or suspect abuse or neglect, such as administrative staff from medical facilities and those employed by financial institutions or insurance companies. If you recall, Mr. Speaker, before, that lovely lady who was taken advantage of by that police officer, if certain institutions were obligated to do these mandatory reporting, maybe that matter would not have happened. Further, all of us as members of Parliament have been identified as mandatory reporters to solidify the moral responsibility that we already have to report suspicious abuse or neglect against older persons. Moreover, Mr. Speaker, there would be restrictions on employing mandatory reporters if they have been convicted or prescribed of prescribed offenses against those who are at risk. There is also requirements on mandatory reporters to undergo training regarding safeguarding and for entities to have policies in line with this legislation regarding their safeguarding procedures. in order to ensure that those who abuse or neglect older persons can be adequately held accountable, this amendment bill establishes an offense where if someone who is in a position of trust, such as someone in the family relationship or a mandatory reporter, engages in abuse or neglect against an older person, they may be liable to a summary conviction in prison for up to 12 years. Mr. Speaker, cases have come to my attention of older persons being severely neglected. I know of a man who was left locked in his room for days with just a bottle of water. The persons responsible for his care were derelict in their duties. If it was not for members of the community bringing it to the attention of the family, this man would have been left longer, and the outcomes could have been much worse. Thank God they were not. We need to make sure that those who interact with our older persons and come across such cases report these to the department so that the proper safeguarding measures can be put in place to protect them. Mr. Speaker, the final safeguarding provision I would like to highlight in this amendment bill is the provision for any person or identified department to make an application to the Grand Court for an intervention order regarding the property, financial affairs, or personal well-being of an older person, where that older person lacks the capacity to take an action or to make a decision. This provision will, for the first time, enable the department to effectively support an older person who does not have family support, whether they do not have children or do not have people who are willing or stable to take on that role. The department will be able to seek an intervention order in relation to a specific matter. In these proceedings, the amendment bill also provides for the older person to be assigned to a guardian ad litem. You know those French words, ad litem. I know you would have corrected me. If there's anybody in this house who's going to correct me, it would be the Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Guardian ad litem, in the court process to advocate on their behalf. And ultimately, for those who don't know French, is basically a person who's selected to act on their legal behalf in proceedings.
Honorable Minister, it's Latin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think we all learned something today. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, the bill establishes for the first time an older persons tribunal. Mr. Speaker, in the Older Persons Act 2017, there were identified rights to which older persons should have access. However, there was no mechanism by which they could seek reparation if those rights were not upheld. In this amendment bill, we have established further rights of access to goods, services, programs, as well as for decision-making. The Older Persons Tribunal will be able to hear complaints in relation to the rights established in Part 4 of the Act and the amended bill, as well as in relation to the requirements for mandatory reporters. Following the hearing, the tribunal is empowered to require remedial action or make an award of cost. The Older Persons Tribunal will consist of a Caymanian chairperson who is an attorney at law for at least 5 years, a deputy chairperson who is an attorney at law for at least 3 years, a person with at least 3 years' experience in finance, a person who is a member of the Council of Older Persons, and one other person who shall have at least 3 years' experience in counseling, psychiatry, psychology, social work, or therapy. The members will be appointed by Cabinet and be published in the Gazette. Mr. Speaker, the amendment bill is arranged in 16 clauses. Clause 1 provides for the short title and commencement of the legislation. Clause 2 provides for the general amendments to the Principal Act in order to replace, references to the Council of Older Persons with references to the Council for Older Persons. Clause 3 amends Section 2 of the Principal Act to insert a number of definitions of terms used in the amending legislation, such as economic abuse. The definition has been added to this legislation based on consultation and understanding the legislative and societal factors in our community. For instance, Mr. Speaker, cases of fraud are not adequately captured by our legislative framework, but will now be better captured by the definition in relation to older persons. In addition, the term older persons is changed from a person over the age of 65 years, to a person who is 65 years of age or older. Clause 4 amends Section 3 of the Principal Act to renumber the schedule, since a second schedule is being inserted in the Principal Act. Clause 5 amends Section 4 of the Principal Act to increase the functions of the Council, including the Act as an advisor and advocate within government agencies to influence policy and promotion towards healthy aging and age-friendly communities. Clause 6 amends Section 5 of the Principal Act to expand the duties of the chairperson of the Council to include ensuring their work is in compliance with the Act and relevant policies and legislation, as well as developing an annual strategic plan. Clause 7 amends Section 6 of the Principal Act to enable the appointment of a secretary to the Council who would conduct administrative duties. Clause 8 inserts into the Principal Act a proposed new Section 7A to impose on the members and the secretary of the Council a duty of confidentiality in respect to matters that are before the Council. Clause 9 inserts into the Principal Act a proposed new Part 12, Part 2A, containing new Sections 9A to Sections 9G. The proposed new sections provide for the following matters, Mr. Speaker. A department of government with responsibility for the subject of older persons, the functions of the department, the duties and the powers of the department to investigate, that the department may charge fees in providing care and support for older persons, the department's power to request assistance in the exercise of its duties from any person, public authority, non-profit organization, or private entity, the duty of confidentiality by the department, and the duty to disclosure of interest by officers of the department. Clause 10 repeals Part 3 of the Principal Act to remove the statutory requirement for the maintenance of the Older Persons Register. Clause 11 inserts into the Principal Act proposed new Sections 17A and 17B. The new Section 17A makes provisions to ensure that older persons have access to goods, services, and programs on an equal basis with a person who is not an older person. Section 17B sets out the right of an older person to make decisions unless they lack the capacity in relation to a matter. Clause 12 inserts 3 parts into the Principal Act. The first is Part 4A in relation to the notification and investigation of abuse or neglect. This part contains proposed new clauses 17C to 17K, which provide for the following matters, Mr. Speaker. Saving of the Protection from Domestic Violence Act 2021 revision, so that persons are not exempt from any duty or obligation imposed by that act. The prohibition prohibition, apologies, Mr. Speaker. The prohibition of abuse or neglect of older persons as an offense with added penalties. A restriction of the employment of mandatory reporters where a mandatory reporter has been convicted of certain prescribed offenses. A requirement for a mandatory reporter to notify the department of suspicions of abuse, neglect, or self-neglect of an older person. Protection from liability for voluntarily or mandatorily notifications of suspicion of abuse of an older person. Confidentiality in relation to notifications of abuse or neglect of an older person. Provisions indicating that the department is not obligated to take action in relation to a notification of suspected abuse or neglect of an older person if the department is of the view that the information received is insufficient to constitute reasonable grounds of suspicion. Assessment and investigation of notifications by the department. And lastly, sharing information relating to abuse or neglect of an older person by the department. Part 4B is the second part inserted into Clause 12, which inserts Clause 17L to provide for the intervention orders for the protection of property, financial affairs, or personal well-being other than health care of an older person. It also authorizes the department to take such action or make such decisions in relation to these matters as specified in the intervention order. Part 4C is the final part inserted into Clause 12, Mr. Speaker. This part establishes the older persons tribunal and inserts clauses 17M to 17S, which makes provisions for the function and the powers of the tribunal, the complaints which the tribunal can hear, as well as their actions based on the outcome of the hearing, the duties of the chairperson and deputy chairperson of the tribunal, the duties of the secretary of the tribunal, the remuneration of the members of the tribunal, and the protection of the members of the tribunal from liability and damages for anything done in the discharge of their functions. Clause 13 increases the penalty imposed by Section 18 of the Principal Act for obstructing persons carrying out lawful functions under the Principal Act. Clause 14 inserts into the Principal Act proposed new Section 18A and Section 18B. The new Section 18A makes provision for a rules committee of the Grand Court to make rules for giving effect to the Principal Act. The new Section 18B makes provision for appeals of court decisions. Clause 15 remunerates the schedule as Schedule 1 and varies the composition of the council. The primary changes in the composition of the council are to add the chairperson and deputy chairperson as two additional persons into legislation, as well as to ensure that the district representatives can be appointed at age 55 years or older, whereas currently it is restricted to older persons 65 years or older. Clause 16 inserts into the Principal Act the proposed new Schedule 2, which deals with the older persons tribunal. Schedule 2 makes provisions for the following matters, Mr. Speaker: the membership of the tribunal, the term of the appointment of members of the tribunal, the quorum of the tribunal at the meeting, the disclosure of interest, termination of membership, vacation of membership, and a duty of confidentiality by the members of the tribunal. Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to present this bill on behalf of the members of this honorable House and proud to be making the necessary steps to improve our quality of care and responsibility morally and legally on behalf of the good people who have steered this country to what it is today. And with that being said, I look forward to the members' full support of these amendments to the Older Persons Amendment Bill 2024. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Does any other member wish to speak? The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to make some brief comments on the Older Persons Amendment Bill 2024. And I'd like to thank the Honourable Minister and Deputy Premier for such a thorough presentation on the bill and for the recognition given to Ms. Lucille and some of the recognizing some of the lobby that Ms. Lucille had for parts of this bill, in particular that of creating a separate department for our older persons. Mr. Speaker, I just hope that, and as we go forward with this, that the department is, first of all, is not just a counter somewhere with a plexiglass and you have to pull a number and sit and wait, but that it actually has officers that go out into the community. And I think we'll have to, it has to be kicked off with a bit of a widely publicized campaign drawing attention to the services and to the office. And I say this, Mr. Speaker, because I recognize a lot of the issues that our constituents and my constituents, the elderly constituents, go through, even just dealing with the Department of Financial Assistance. And you've heard me here before call on that department having case officers that actually go out into the community. Because when, just as recent as last week, when a department calls a 90-plus-year-old person to carry out certain compliance questions, tasks, or being asked to come in to present certain tasks, once that person hangs up the phone, they have no idea what they were asked of. And if they don't have a friend or a child or a constituency office to call to say, I got a call, I don't know what they were talking about, but I got a call. And if they don't have someone to make that call to, what will happen is they won't provide the information. They'll get someone to take them to the bank and help them operate their ATM card, because most of them still feel uncomfortable doing it. And that is a risk in its own, where we can see elderly people. I know of elderly people who are charged $100 to be driven to the bank for the person to operate the ATM for them because they're illiterate. They can't read what the ATM says. So they pay a person $100 every month to drive them to the bank, and they take the person's debit card and withdraw the money for them, give it to them, and gets $100 out of it. That's if they're not stealing more from them. So what will happen is if they don't provide that information, their services are cut off. They go there one day, they pay their $100, the guy can still charge them $100. And they get there to the ATM and there's no money. Another issue, Mr. Speaker, similar to that, you've heard me talk about homeless people, new addicts that we see in our communities, that we see right around Georgetown here. If you can't find a beat officer, you don't know who to call. You don't know how to get help for that person. And it is something that we're seeing more and more, and you call several departments and you hear, okay, if a child is not involved, it's not us. Are they Caymanian? We don't know. Well, you got to find out if they're Caymanian first. You call the beat officer, they come and they're willing to help if you can get them, if they're not on vacation or pulled off because there's too many burglaries or they're doing night operations or a boat came in or something like that. You have to sit with them and try to figure out how to criminalize the person so they can arrest them to try and help them. Right? So unless they're a child, no matter what their age is, you know, and if you care, and if you're a representative that drives through your constituency and knows everyone and checks, and you see a new lost individual, and I won't label them with anything else in that because you don't know what the situation is. You don't know who to call to get help. And even if you do run into a senior, which you know, the Lord works in mysterious ways. I told you this story last night, Mr. Speaker. Lord works in mysterious ways. I was walking my dog, and someone a few weeks ago had made a mess with near my house with coconut husk and stuff. And I saw the bicycle, and I saw the person in the bush, and I mistook it for another one of my constituents that I could. I felt comfortable, you know, making a joke with the individual. So I waited with my dog, and my dog got anticipated because the dog saw that I was focusing. And this elderly gentleman came out with this bag of coconuts, and as he turned the corner, almost gave the poor gentleman a heart attack with the dog. And then I realized it wasn't the person I thought it was. So I spoke to him, got his story, and, well, I got part of his story. He said to me, you know, he can't work right now because he had an operation, and he gets the coconuts to make a few dollars. So I said to him, did you husk these ones here? He said, yeah. And I said, well, when you husk them, just throw the husk in the bush, throw it off the road. And I said, nothing wrong with an earnest dollar. And I got his name. And so I went away, went about my business. And then on Tuesday morning, I had a meeting down at the Niels Godfrey Park with Parks and Recreations. And I saw the gentleman come in on his bicycle. And he sat under the cabana and threw his head back, and he just went limp. And I said, oh, my goodness. I said, that's that gentleman. And the Parks and Recreation persons told me his name and said, that man worked for DEH for decades. I know him as Mr. So-and-so. So as soon as we finished talking, I went over to check on him, and he had laid down by that time, and he was crying. This is an older gentleman, and he was crying. So I said to him, are you okay? He said, his stomach, he said, I haven't been able to sleep all night. He said, my stomach is hurting. So I said to him, well, let me call the ambulance. I said, can you go to the hospital? He said, no. I said, let me call the ambulance. He said, no, I don't have any insurance. So, do you have status? No, I have PR. I said, okay. I said, where do you live? Do you have a place to stay? He said, yes, in West Bay. So I said, well, how come I see you here in town? This is twice in 1 week. He said, well, some nights I clean up a restaurant, and it don't make any sense to go back to West Bay. So anyway, after speaking to him more, trying to reach a couple of EMTs that I know, and unfortunately I couldn't reach them because they'd be willing to help. Reluctant to call 911. Couldn't reach any of my beat officers. Couldn't reach a safety officer. I began to question him some more, and I said, I looked at his bicycle, I saw no water bottle or anything. I said, when last did you eat? He said, yesterday, I think. So I said, when last did you have water? Yesterday, I think. And so I quickly went to the little shop in the area and got him some ginger ale, some crackers, a bottle of water, and some other food, and I took it back for him and said, take your time and eat and have the crackers and have the water. And he did so, and I could see him brightening up as he did. I don't know what has happened to the gentleman. I had no one to report that to. I could sit all day on the phone, and you will get no action on it. Because there's no specific person. There's this unknown entity when you find these things in your community that no one knows who that person is. Everybody, it's somebody else depending. And the only way to help someone is to get them to commit a crime. That's the only way to get them help. If they need to be rehabilitated, if they need mental health help, If they're just homeless, the only way to get them to get help, and the only way the police can help, who are willing most of the time, is if they commit a crime. I have another story of a senior who filled out I said to him, "You're entitled to get help from government." And he said, "Oh," and I said, "You want help with filling out the forms?" He said, "No, I can do it." So we got him the forms and stuff. Anyway, I checked back with him. He said he had been denied. After back and forth, he had been denied. I said, how could you be denied? And he said, "Well, they said I didn't have any bills." And I said, "Well, did you tell them that you don't have any electricity because your weatherhead is down from a storm and your roof is leaking, and that your water got cut off over 10 years ago? That's why you don't have any bills?" He said, "Well, no, I didn't tell them that. They asked me they wanted my water bill, my electricity bill, and I told them I didn't have any." And then he said, they asked me about my work, and I said, "Well, sometimes I do a little work," and they asked me how much I get paid. I said, $300. And I said, "Well, when last did you do that?" He said, "About 7 months ago." And so, and the person is calling and getting this information from them, why doesn't someone get up? Why isn't there an officer that goes and visits the location? Why doesn't someone go and physically see what is the situation with this person? Then I signed him up for the home repair. We haven't heard a word about that. Unfortunately, his mother put some gentleman on the land papers some 40 years ago. The gentleman he remembers as a kid, or as a young man, was from Jamaica. He knows nothing else about the gentleman. Nobody on island seems to know anything about him, but I assume that is one of the hurdles for him to get repairs on the house. But I'm saying all of these stories to say that all of this sounds good. It's a step forward, it's a step in the right direction to have the department. But if we just look at the department as an office, as a building, and somebody getting a nice job, and they get a nice car to drive around with a big signage on it, it's not helping. It's not helping. We have to ensure that the people that need these services are sought out. We have to ensure that those who are most vulnerable, the ones that fall through the gap, they are the ones we really need to focus on. Those that have kids that can help them, or neighbors or friends that fill out their forms, take care of them, but they are forgotten people out there. And a lot of them, and DG, please don't take offense to this, it was even before your time, but a lot of them are former civil servants, and DEH in particular, because I understand that 30 years ago, whatever, it was 1 year contracts, 1 year contracts, 1 year contracts. Then they stay here and work DEH for 25 years. They get PR, and then they get released, and they run 1 year contract, 1 year contract, 1 year contract. No insurance, nothing. Doing the job that none of us will go out and do. So these are the people, these are the seniors that we really need to make sure we reach. The ones that have children that could take care of them but are not doing so. We can't hold that elderly person responsible for that. We can't make them continue to suffer. Listen, you give them enough money to cover water, electricity, and food and stuff. Every one of us knows, no matter how much we budget, if you're living in a house, something can go wrong. Every month you think you're going to put money in the bank, your AC gone. You got water leak. And the poor elderly people don't find out until 1 month later when it's $700, $800. And then they don't have anybody to come and help or whatever, and then it goes 2 months and it's $1,600. Right? They don't include, if something falls in a house or the window breaks, they don't get it fixed. They go further and further into poverty because they're only given enough money to cover their basic needs. And every one of us in here knows that just enough to cover your basic needs cannot keep a house. You cannot upkeep your house with just basic needs. And you don't want to be put in a position where you fix the window or pay your utility bill or fix the toilet so your water bill isn't so high but skip your meal. And these people can't be held behind a desk. And they do not do online. For all of us out there, when you're dealing with these folks, you can't put everything online. If you're going to put everything online, you have to have dedicated people to pick up a laptop or a app, tablet, and go out and help these folks. I am all for, anyone that knows me know that I'm all for going digital and advancements and that sort of stuff, but when we are dealing with an elderly people, we've got to ensure that we don't make anyone fall through the cracks. We've got to ensure that everyone, every single person, is covered. Mr. Speaker, going back to those who have children that could care for them, but don't. Take the house, give them a similar thing to a reverse mortgage, take care of the elderly person, take care of them, but put a charge over the house that when the time comes and the kids come running to take and fight over the land, government has to be paid back. Government has to be paid back. But don't make the person suffer because their kids don't care for them. I don't care what the law says. Don't make our people suffer because their children don't care for them. Mr. Speaker, it is estimated that the population, the elderly population, will triple in the next 30 years. And if some of us in here are fortunate enough, that'll be us. And so, Mr. Speaker, in closing, it is critical that we now create the environment and the infrastructure, and put the infrastructure in place to ensure that we prioritize the needs and preserve the dignity of our senior citizens. And I'll close by saying it. Sounds great, looks great, but it can't be done from behind a desk and plexiglass. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
That, I think, is an appropriate note on which to conclude today's sitting and invite the Honorable Premier to move the adjournment motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to move the adjournment of this Honorable Parliament until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning.
The question is that the House do now adjourn until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. I believe the ayes have it. The House stands adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow, Thursday, 12th of December at 10 a.m.